The elevator doors opened to the 21st floor, and I stepped into a hallway buzzing with unease. It wasn't even 9 in the morning, yet the Luminari Systems cafeteria had been transformed into a pseudo-ballroom. Silver trays of champagne flutes lined the tables, confetti cannons waited by the stage, and a banner above the projector screen read, Luminaris plus Bell Ridge Capital 400-mere deal. My stomach tightened. Surprise celebrations on a Tuesday morning rarely meant good news for anyone not on the poster. Gideon Cross, our CEO, strode onto the stage like he owned the air itself. He wore his usual navy suit and that permanent smirk, the one he saved for quarterly calls, and people he was about to step on. "Team," he began, voice booming against the glass walls, "today marks the beginning of Luminari's next era. Bell Ridge Capital has officially acquired our company for $400 million. Cheers erupted. Champagne corks popped. Confetti fluttered over rows of stiff-backed chairs. Then he pivoted, and, in line with our strategic restructuring, effective immediately, Ilara Novian's role has been eliminated. It hit like a cold slap. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Developers froze mid-sip. A project manager fumbled a glass, the stem snapping on the floor. I stood, smoothed my charcoal blazer, and felt every pair of eyes lock onto me. 11 years in this building, and my exit music was the sound of awkward silence. Security approached with rehearsed indifference. I let them escort me toward the door, heels clicking on polished concrete. I refused to stumble. No tears, no protest. My gaze lifted one last time to the massive screen cycling through product slides, and I saw it. Tiny. Tucked in the corner of the Luminaris OS prototype metadata I had embedded months ago. Property of Ilara Novian, LLC. They'd scrubbed my face from their world, but they hadn't erased the spine holding it up. As the elevator descended, I slipped my phone from my pocket and typed a single line to a number few people knew existed. Move the case. Phase 1 starts now. Sent. The doors opened to the ground floor. Outside, Manhattan traffic roared under a sky that glared too bright for a Tuesday. I inhaled once, slow and even, and walked into the morning like I had somewhere important to be because I did. By the time I reached Brooklyn, the adrenaline from my very public firing had cooled into a sharp, steady focus. The streets were damp from last night's rain, reflecting streaks of early sunlight off the glass facades. I slipped into a quiet side street where the bank sat tucked between a nail salon and an organic grocer, looking far too ordinary for the secrets it kept. Inside, the marble floors muffled my footsteps. A clerk recognized me without a word and led me past the glass offices and down a hallway to the vault. The air cooled to a crisp, dry hum as the steel doors parted. My thumb pressed against the biometric pad, and the machine chirped its approval. A moment later, Box 1129 slid out with the patience of a well-trained soldier. Inside lay the life I had built in silence, a matte black fireproof briefcase and a small, translucent thumb drive with a strip of red tape marked with my initials. My fingers hovered over them for a beat before lifting both out carefully. I remembered the night my father and I prepared this box. He'd been retired for 2 years, his health already waning, but his mind razor sharp. Papers were spread across his oak dining table, patent transfers, provisional filings, trust agreements. He'd signed each page with meticulous care, pausing only to sip black coffee and offer the advice that had become my quiet armor. If they won't see you, make sure they need you. He knew this world better than anyone, how companies would happily squeeze you dry and discard you if you let them. His hands shook as he notarized the last signature, but he'd smiled, proud. I set the briefcase on a narrow table, opened it, and checked its contents, 7 active patents under my LLC, all clean and untangled from the company's legal shell games. The drive contained encrypted backups of source code and a trail of ownership that no one at Luminaris could erase. I closed the case and held it against me for a moment, letting the weight remind me of every overlooked night I had poured into their empire. Then I walked out into the Brooklyn air, knowing my next move would make the city hold its breath. My apartment greeted me with the familiar stillness of a space designed for function, not comfort. The walls were lined with filing cabinets and shelves stacked with legal binders. In the center of it all, on a narrow shelf above my kitchen island, sat the single-framed photo of my father smiling in a suit he'd probably worn to court. His eyes crinkled with quiet pride. I placed the briefcase on the island and snapped it open. Manila folders spilled across the counter like a timeline of my life at Luminaris 7 patents, meticulously notarized, ownership transfers routed through the LLC, and schematic diagrams that had carried the company from a scrappy startup to an acquisition target worth $400 million. I spread them out, reviewing each page with the care of a surgeon. My father's voice echoed in my mind. Soft and steady, make sure they need you. 11 years. 11 years of invisible work. I had trained bright young developers only to watch them get fast-tracked into leadership because they played golf or smiled in the right meetings. I had skipped vacations to fix back-end disasters while my name never appeared on a single press release. They had called me reliable, which in corporate language meant safe to ignore, safe to use, safe to discard. I picked up my laptop and entered a long string of characters into an encrypted email portal. The connection routed through 3 servers before I could type a single word to Bell Ridge Capital's general counsel. I attached a limited preview of the patent filings, just enough to make them pause, just enough to make them sweat. I typed only one line. You may wish to confirm ownership before your 400 deal closes. My finger hovered over the trackpad for a moment before I clicked send. The message vanished into the digital ether, silent and untraceable. The apartment was so quiet that the hum of the refrigerator felt like company. Loneliness pressed at the edges of my focus, but it didn't break me. I wasn't playing for recognition or an apology. I was playing for control. I closed the briefcase, locked it, and slid it under the island. My phone buzzed once a reply from Bellridge requesting an immediate meeting. The elevator ride up to Bellridge Capital's top floor was silent, except for the soft hum of cables. My reflection in the chrome doors looked calm, collected, and sharper than I felt. The receptionist led me through a glass corridor into a meeting room tucked away from the main offices, a quiet box with a mahogany table, recessed lighting, and a skyline view that seemed to judge everyone in it. 3 people waited the general counsel. Jonathan Fields, with silver hair and a voice that could cut marble, a younger VP in a navy suit with jittery hands, and a woman from strategic development, all posture and polite suspicion. Ms. Novian, Jonathan said, gesturing to the chair across from him. We weren't expecting, I know, I said, setting the black folio on the table. But you should have been... I opened it with one smooth motion. The first page, a notarized list of 7 patents. The second, filing logs with timestamps, provisional holds, and trust assignments, all pointing back to me. Their eyes scanned the documents, and the room tightened with an invisible cord. So, Jonathan began slowly. You're saying Luminaris does not own its core IP, I said, voice steady. They assumed they were wrong. Any acquisition requires my inventor release. The younger VP blinked, his jaw slackening. Then, who you're looking at her. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Outside the glass, the city kept moving, unaware that 400 million of corporate optimism had just hit a wall. Jonathan leaned back. Are you here to litigate, Nummer? I said. letting a small, precise smile show. I'm here to negotiate. They fired me on stage. Maybe let them finish their champagne before they choke on it. The VP let out a nervous half laugh, half gasp. I slid a single-page licensing proposal across the table. It wasn't everything, just enough to make them realize they were standing on sand. Jonathan nodded slowly, calculating. We'll need to review this internally. Do that, I said, rising. I'll be in touch. I left the building without looking back, my heels clicking like a countdown as I stepped into the sharp midtown air. By the next morning, the first ripples reached me before I even finished my coffee. A screenshot from Luminaris's investor page appeared in a message from an old colleague. 404 error page not found. The 400 Millionaires acquisition banner had disappeared overnight. Then came the whispers. Slack messages from anonymous sources trickled into my encrypted inbox. Anyone know why the press release is gone? Legal says there's an IP issue. Something about ownership not matching up. If this deal tanks, Gideon's done. I pictured the open office I had walked through 1,000 times, developers swiveling in their chairs, managers trying to look calm while scrolling frantically. The glass conference rooms, now war rooms. Slack channels buzzing like a hornet nest. Only this time, the sting was coming from the name they'd tried to erase. Then, an email landed in my private account. Short, quiet, unpolished. Brenda, sorry. Ilera. I don't know what's happening exactly, but people are talking. You built this place. Everyone knows it now. The sender was Julian, a junior developer I'd mentored my second year at Luminaris. I could almost see his nervous smile through the words. The way he hovered at my desk years ago asking how I refactored code so quickly. The email did more than vindicate me. It stung. I'd poured 11 years of loyalty into that glass tower, skipped birthdays, canceled trips, carried them through crashes and bugs and late-night rollbacks, and in the end, my exit came with confetti and security escorts. I opened the attachment he'd risked sending a Slack screenshot showing Jira tickets and source commits. My initials clear as day next to the backbone of their system. Someone had started connecting the dots internally. I leaned back, letting the quiet of my apartment settle around me. Vindication wasn't warm, it was cold and heavy, like standing outside watching a building crack from the inside. By mid-afternoon, another notification blinked across my screen, this one not from an ally, but from Luminaris itself. And the subject line made my pulse slow with a different kind of satisfaction. The message from Luminaris arrived just after dusk. A single-line subject, urgent board request. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. They wanted me back in the building that had kicked me out less than 48 hours ago. By the time I reached the 21st floor, the office was unrecognizable. The usual glow of monitors had been replaced with the cold fluorescence of an emergency meeting. The boardroom's glass walls reflected the Manhattan skyline, fractured by sleepless city lights. Inside, the room smelled of stress and stale coffee. Gideon Cross sat at the head of the table, his perfect suit wrinkled, his tie loosened. Around him were 3 board members and the VP of Investor Relations, each wearing the strained expression of people who had tasted panic and were trying to hide it. Alara, Gideon began, his voice low but rehearsed. We want to acknowledge a misstep. Your departure was premature. He gestured to a folder slid across the polished wood. We're prepared to reinstate you with a new title, Chief Innovation Officer, a signing bonus, public apology, total control of the IP team. The VP leaned forward, smiling like she was offering me a rare vintage wine, whatever you need to feel whole again. I let my fingers rest on the folder but didn't open it. The quiet stretched long enough for someone to shift in their chair. Then I spoke, calm and sharp as a blade. You already fired me, I said. I don't return to tables I built, and you broke. Gideon's jaw tightened. One board member inhaled through his nose, as if bracing for a hit. I stood, slow and deliberate. You think this is about ego? I continued. It's not. This is about control, and I have it. I don't need your titles or your apologies. I don't need to sit here at all. No one moved as I walked to the door, the click of my heels louder than any argument they might have made. Outside, the night air hit my face, cool and sharp. My phone buzzed in my hand, a message from Bell Ridge Capital confirming that the next phase of our arrangement was ready to proceed. By the next morning, the first official signal of implosion arrived. Bell Ridge Capital issued a terse statement. Acquisition paused pending verification of intellectual property holdings. In corporate language, that was a warning shot dressed as a courtesy. I sat at my kitchen island in my Brooklyn apartment, steam rising from a mug of black tea, watching the world unravel through a laptop screen. Slack messages forwarded from sympathetic insiders trickled in like gossip carried on a whispering wind. HR isn't answering phones. Legal is in conference room D. Someone literally threw up in the trash can. Gideon's got his sleeves rolled up. He looks like he's about to start a motivational YouTube channel. I imagine the glass tower I'd left behind, jittery developers staring at blank monitors, managers pacing hallways, executives hunched over laptops as if hunching could keep the building from tilting. Then came the screenshot that made my pulse slow with satisfaction, an internal audit spreadsheet, highlighted in urgent yellow, with a single note in the margin: primary ownership Elara Novian LLC, 7 patents, the spine of Luminaris's valuation, all tied to me, my name in legal black and white where they'd tried to make me invisible. I sipped my tea, letting the heat cut through the quiet. There was no need to raise my voice, no need to send another email. Gravity was doing the work for me. By noon, the whispers in my inbox turned to frantic admissions. Someone from accounting wrote that the board was rotating through emergency sessions and investors were circling like sharks. Another message from Julian, the junior dev, simply said, "They finally get it." I closed my laptop and leaned back. The sunlight glancing off the edge of the briefcase still tucked beneath my counter. The city outside hummed with its usual chaos. But here, in my apartment, it was just quiet enough to hear the sound of an empire starting to fall. When my phone buzzed again, it wasn't Slack gossip, it was Bell Ridge, asking if I was ready for the next step. By Wednesday morning, the decision was final. Bell Ridge Capital's legal team gathered in a private conference room, a world away from the panic at Luminaris, and slid the final licensing agreement across the table to me. My signature joined theirs in a neat row at the bottom, black ink sealing what months of quiet calculation had prepared. My LLC now licensed the core technology directly to Bell Ridge, bypassing Luminaris entirely. The emails started an hour later. First, the internal memo effective immediately. Bell Ridge Capital has withdrawn from the Luminaris acquisition due to material misrepresentation of intellectual property holdings. No sympathy, no spin, just the corporate equivalent of a guillotine dropping. I watched the digital tremors ripple outward. Luminaris' stock plummeted in real time, red arrows cutting across every finance tracker. Screenshots flooded my inbox Slack channels, frozen in stunned silence. Managers typing and deleting messages that would never save them. Then, the courier arrived at Luminaris HQ, carrying a single cream-colored envelope addressed to Gideon Cross. Inside was one page, concise and lethal. All intellectual property rights remain with the original inventor. Acquisition withdrawn. And taped neatly to the top with a strip of neon yellow was a sticky note in blocky, Sharpie letters. Next time, read the bylines. I didn't need to be there to imagine his face when he opened it. The tight jaw, The flicker of disbelief, the dawning horror of realizing that the celebration he'd orchestrated was the same stage he'd chosen to saw in half beneath himself. Back in my apartment, I sat with the briefcase at my side and the quiet hum of the city below my window. No shouting, no revenge speech, no grand finale, just the soft, relentless weight of consequence settling where it belonged. By evening, a final message pinged from Belridge's counsel, confirming the first payment to my LLC and requesting availability for onboarding my chosen engineers. I closed the laptop and let the silence linger, knowing that the next move was entirely mine. The co-working space in Brooklyn smelled faintly of coffee and new carpet, sunlight pouring through glass walls that framed the city like a painting. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. The name Novian Core Consulting glowed on the wall behind my modest desk, a quiet declaration that I had stopped waiting for permission to lead. I sat at a long oak table, laptop open, watching the onboarding documents populate with Belridge's name as our first official client, their logo, once a symbol of the deal that tried to erase me, now sat under the column labeled Partner. The irony wasn't lost on me one by one. The people I had chosen filtered into the space. 5 engineers I trusted, people who had stayed late to debug when others disappeared, who shared quiet nods instead of grandstanding in meetings. Julian was the first to arrive, looking around with wide eyes, a backpack slung over one shoulder. "So this is it," he said, grinning. "This is the start." I replied. We spent the morning mapping out roles and reviewing the secured code base that now lived entirely under my LLC, for the first time in my career. I wasn't the ghost behind the curtain or the silent architect waiting for someone else to take the credit. Every diagram we sketched, every strategy we debated, felt like planting flags in ground I actually owned. I paused to look around the room. Sunlight bounced off the whiteboard where our new roadmap was taking shape. The hum of collaboration was softer than the chaos of corporate open offices, but it vibrated with something more potent freedom. I realized then that this wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about watching Luminaris bleed or replaying the sting of public humiliation. This was about building a life where I didn't have to ask to exist. As the team settled into their work, I stepped to the window, hands in my pockets, watching the city move below us. The skyline was the same as the day they'd walked me out with security, but now it felt like a horizon instead of a cage. By evening, a new message blinked across my phone, carrying an invitation I hadn't expected but had already earned. The evening light stretched long across my balcony, the city humming beneath me as Manhattan slipped into dusk. I balanced my laptop on the narrow table, the glow of one new email catching my eye. It was from Brendan Weiss, Belridge's CEO. "You're the reason we're still moving forward. If you ever want the CEO seat, it's yours." I read it twice, then closed the lid without typing a word. That chapter, the one where I fought for a chair at someone else's table, was already over. My life was no longer about sitting in rooms that tolerated me. It was about building the rooms myself, inside. The apartment was a patchwork of quiet ambition, rolled blueprints leaning against the wall, folders of patent schematics, and now, on my kitchen island, a fresh set of architectural sketches for a new project. Not a product this time. A place, a tech incubator for minds like mine, the ones who do the work but never get the stage lights. I spread the sketches out, running a finger along the outline of glass corridors and open collaboration hubs. I could already see it, a space that would never host a celebration built on erasing someone, a building that belonged to creators first. The thought settled over me warmer than any toast or confetti ever had. The night air drifted through the open balcony door, carrying the hum of the city with it. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in, letting the noise and the lights remind me that this city had tried to swallow me once and failed. I stacked the sketches neatly, tucking them into my bag for tomorrow. My reflection in the balcony glass looked calm, certain, untouchable. A soft smile crept onto my face as I whispered to the empty room. They thought I wanted my old chair back. I've been designing the building,